Will you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
We are coming to the end of the liturgical calendar. Next Sunday, actually, is the last Sunday of the Christian year, and then a new year starts all over again with the first Sunday of Advent. And you may have noticed, as we approach the end of the liturgical cycle, that our lectionary readings have been talking a lot about the end with a capital E, as in the end of time, the last days, the coming of God's kingdom. This morning's readings give us two descriptions of the end. Our Old Testament reading from Isaiah and our Gospel reading from Luke. And boy, let me tell you, you couldn't ask for two more different accounts of what is supposed to be the same event. Isaiah's vision is often called the peaceable kingdom, the wolf and the lamb lying down together. Isaiah speaks of a new Jerusalem, which sounds a lot like the old Jerusalem, except that everything, works. In this new Jerusalem, sounds of weeping and distress are replaced with rejoicing and delight. Children do not die young, and the old live out their days in peace. No one is an exile or a refugee. Rather, people build homes, and then they live in them. They plant crops, and they're around to enjoy the harvest. According to Isaiah, life at the end looks a lot like life today, just better. The whole world is a community of harmony, prosperity, and peace. Biblical scholars have a name for this kind of end times vision. They call it realized eschatology. Eschatology just means a description of how it all ends. And realized eschatology is centered around the conviction that God's kingdom is, in some form, already present here on earth. It is like a seed that has been planted and is slowly growing, getting bigger and bigger, more evident among us. In realized eschatology, God's goodness gradually unfolds in human history, and the end goal is really just a perfected version of the world we already know and love. Luke paints an entirely different picture of the end. The visions we hear in Luke's gospel are what we call apocalyptic eschatology, an end times that come suddenly, even violently. God intervenes dramatically in human history, turning everything upside down. The temple is torn down. Wars, famines, earthquakes, and plagues ravage the earth. False messiahs come, speaking in Jesus' name. Believers are persecuted and thrown in prison. It's chaos. It's hardship. And actually what we read this morning is only the first half of it. Don't worry, we'll hear the rest on the first Sunday in Advent. In apocalyptic eschatology, the end of time is not the inevitable outgrowth of all that is good on earth. On the contrary, it is Jesus coming on the clouds into a world full of chaos and destruction, returning to earth to set things right. Now, in case you, like many Christians, have been taught to read these sorts of scriptures literally, let me begin by stating the obvious. These two visions cannot both literally be true. It's logically impossible. The end can't be both the peaceable kingdom of joy and delight and an apocalyptic disaster zone of plagues, earthquakes, and wars. We can't have both a famine and the lion eating straw like the ox. If there's a famine going on, where did the lion get that straw? So whatever these eschatological end times visions are, they are not and never were meant to be literal predictions of how the end plays out. In fact, we might do better to see them as the musings of Isaiah and of Luke, faithful people living in two utterly different times and contexts, trying to make sense of the events going on in the world around them. God's people looking for God's activity in the theater of human history. Isaiah, it comes from the end of the book, so technically 3rd Isaiah, is writing to Jews who have recently returned to Jerusalem after the Babylonian exile. They're back in their homeland. They've built a new temple, but these post-exilic people are disappointed. The new temple is shabby. It pales in comparison to Solomon's temple that the Babylonians destroyed a generation ago. Their beloved city still lays in the ruins of warfare. They are a mere remnant of who they were before the exile. God's people are discouraged by who they have become. And into their discouragement, Isaiah speaks a word of hope. Do not despair, faithful people, for you are seeds that God has planted. God's kingdom is taking root and growing within you. Yes, it may look small and shabby now, but give it time, and you'll see what blossoms. God is making all things new, making this world into a place where all God's creatures live in peace and prosperity. It may not look like it today, but you, little post-exilic community, are the seed that will grow into God's peaceable kingdom. Luke, on the other hand, is writing to first-century Christians who have just lived through the first Jewish-Roman War. Roman armies have destroyed the Jerusalem temple. Wars are raging everywhere. Christians and Jews alike are both being persecuted, martyred, thrown into prison. All is chaos, catastrophe, and destruction. And as far as anyone can tell, that's the way things evermore shall be. The world looks like it's just about to implode on itself. Into these events, Luke says, be not afraid, for this is not how the story ends. Stay faithful to the gospel. Look to the clouds, and after these things you will see the Son of Man coming in glory. God will intervene in this mess of a world to restore goodness in human history. Jesus is coming to turn this all upside down and make this world right. These are two radically different end-time scenarios from two radically different historical situations. But it's interesting. Did you notice? Isaiah and Luke's visions share two things in common. First, for both of them, God comes into the real messiness of actual human history. No one gets shipped off to heaven. There's no great pie in the sky and the great by and by. No, instead, God comes into the world as it is and meets the people exactly where they are. Second, In both visions, God's people have a role to play. For Isaiah, our job is to live into this society, to build and plant and harvest and bear children, to invest ourselves in life, and to keep the peaceable kingdom going. For Luke, our role is to bear witness to the gospel and to God's goodness even while the world is falling apart. For both of them, we are part of the good that comes at the end. There is no passive escapism. We do not get to sit idly by while God's kingdom comes. Friends, I wonder, if we were to write an eschatology for our time, what would it include? If we were to look around at the events of our world and try to interpret them through the lens of God's kingdom, what would we say? I'm not talking about all that left behind nonsense or trying to decode the apocalypse. I'm talking about looking at our human story in 2025 and saying, where is God at work? What are the seeds of goodness that God has planted among us? And where do we need our God to come and intervene to make things right? And perhaps the scariest question of all, what might be our role in all of this? In ushering in God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. Oh, there's one more thing these two eschatologies share in common. God wins. Love wins. Goodness triumphs over evil. That is always the end of the biblical story. Ultimately, if you were to ask me for an honest, faith-informed description of how it all ends, that's the only answer I could really give you. God wins. Goodness prevails. I don't know if it's in this world or the world to come. If there's a great turmoil before or if we slide peaceably in. I don't know if we go or how we go or where we go or what we become. But I do believe in the witness of our faith. And if I believe that, then I believe God wins. And I choose to believe that. Even now. Even in this world. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done. On earth as it is in